Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So we'll start the next session. So please be seated. So before we begin, you must be curious what was in the gift box that we just presented to Professor Williams. So this art piece is a limited version from one of the most famous art studio in Taiwan called Liuli Gongfang, featuring the plum blossom, which is our national flower in Taiwan. The flower is a symbol for resilience and perseverance in the face of adversity, which is often the environment that public health practitioners face. However, the blossoms often bloom most vibrantly even amidst the harsh winter snow. And that's the gift for today for Professor Williams. Okay, so we will now continue the next session. This session will be hosted by Professor Changfu Wu. Professor Wu obtained his doctoral degree from the Department of Environmental Health at University of Washington. He's now a professor with an adjunct appointment in both environmental health and Institute of Occupational Medicine and Industrial Hygiene in our college. Also, he is the Associate Dean of the college. Let's welcome Professor Wu to host the session, Public Health Education Now and Then.
Thank you. I'm Zhang Fu, and also one of the students of KP students. Let me briefly introduce our speaker, our Dean Chen. Dean Chen obtained his bachelor degree from this department, Department of Public Health of NTU, in 1982. Then he got his master and doctoral degree from Harvard. He has many great achievements. Today, I just would like to highlight two of them. First, he has a lot of international collaborative projects in many countries, like in the US, European countries, Thailand, Malaysia, India, Korea, Japan. Hopefully I didn't miss any one of them. Mongolia, yes. Second, he's now the counselor of the ISEE, International Society of Environmental Epidemiology. He's also the chair of its Asian chapter. Now, let's welcome Dean Chen to give a talk on the public health education.
Well, good morning again. And before our talk, we have a conversation. We'll keep it short and have more interaction. So I probably spend just a few minutes talk about this public health now and then, especially under the framework of the time frame of KP. So let's think about it as a public health educators in his time and in our time. What we have to think in terms of demographic and environment. So Taiwan, the modern Taiwan is about 400s, right? It's always a strategic internationally, you know. So it's about every country, always this. Geopolitical centers of international trade and wars. I think trade and wars are most important for big change in public health. And it's a battleground for traders and soldiers. They are pursuing economic and political gains. You know, so this land has different kind of people coming. So we have aboriginals, Hans, Manchurian, Spanish, English, Dutch, Canadian, Japanese, Americans settled down in this land, and immunity has been changed over the times. Okay. I think it's the same in many countries too. So in terms of this modern Taiwan, you know, political developments, 1892 to 1945 as a colony. 46 to 87 is authoritarian countries, you know, only one party. okay? But since 1985, a democratic countries, and economic developments going from agriculture, manufacturing, now to the service. So it's all happening in a very short period. So squeeze our capability of adjustments for public health. But we did very well. Look at these life expectancies in the past centuries, increasing from around 30 to 40 to now over 80s. So quite achievements. And if you look at the population structures after the World War II, it looks like that. And we only have around 8 million populations and many young people, right? 72, when the Department of Public Health was set up. Still very young, but economy is very good. We double the size of our populations, and economy is almost a wonders. We have almost 8 times bigger GDP per capita at that time. So, when KP on that side, sitting there, he's thinking of increasing populations, a growing economy, and there's a lot of things to do. So everything he thought of is doing more, I think. In 1993, our population has already changed a little bit, a little bit fat after the World War II. These baby boomers become adults. This is just like our BMI, right? Now it's obesity, pandemic. And now, this is the time we are, We have the population up to 23.5 million, and the GPT compared to 1951, there's a tremendous change. But as we have the tone this morning, we are aging. So now we are sitting here with our friends from Boston. Dean Williams here give us some of his wisdoms. What kind of public health education we will educate? So 50 or 40 years later, what will be the population structures we have? Are we doing more, or we should do smarter? Okay. So over the years, under the great achievements of the KP and his students, we have this infectious disease controls, and discovered and control endemic diseases. Occupational environment disease we discover and set up agencies to deal with. Population controls, and national health insurance. When I was a student, Professor Yang Ziliang, now he was a joke this morning, always late. And he told us, so we had a motto not to give 2 more babies if you are the public health students. So I did it, but we was wrong, right? We should have 3, otherwise. But national health insurance is a great universal coverage. We are very proud of it, still very proud of it, okay? So this is how we started in Taihoku Imperial College, 1933. We have Institute of Tropical Medicines. It's a small plate in a big institutions. In 1951, it becomes Institute of Public Health after World War II, right? Then 1972, I think that's the most important undergraduate program. If there's no such program, there will be no Dean Chen here, because I attended this department. And more than 1,000 graduates since then. And one important thing is College of Public Health, 1993, when I was about to graduate. I called CJ when he was visiting in Colombia, and should I go back to Taiwan? And he said, sure, we are going to have a College of Public Health, and we'll have a building like this in 2 or 3 years. But the College of Public Health took 3 years after my returns, but this building took about 15 years to have it. Yeah, but it's a new building in 2005, and one of the most important achievements is under the Tony Zhang and Wei Jian, and we work together, have the CEPH accredited this year. So we enter a new era. Now we have most students in graduate schools and about 150 undergraduate only, and mostly masters. So we are very good at master training. And famous alumni, as I say, the first epidemiology served as a VP in any country in the world. So this should be put in ASPPH motto, right? That's, and he's the second dean of this school, very good. So look at this. Our life expectancy increases over the year when this institute, department, and colleges are established. And economics grew over the year, but now it's stagnant and population declining. That's what we have to think about it. So I thought public health challenge in this century, we have infectious disease, new and old, NCD, young and old, global warming and air pollution, food safety, long-term care, and democratic crisis, low fertility, and low migrations. It's scary. You know, we cannot find enough manpower to do all kinds of jobs, you know, from blue collar to white collar. So this is what we face in Taiwan. I think similar in some countries. So take an environment, you know, when KP was thinking about this, and the CO2 concentration is about 320. Now it's 400. It's going up and up. And the world become warmer and warmer. And the hurricanes, the typhoons become severe and severe. So how should we teach our students to do it? Okay. So how to control global warming, and under the global warming, how to teach is a key message I want to convey to you that we have to think. The projected population structures of 2060s, you know, 40 years later, we are going to shrink our total population to the time of 1970s. Right? That's about the population when I moved from the rural side of Taiwan to Taipei to study. So are we thinking of the growth curve or decline curve? Is this sustainable or not? You know, that's the big challenge of the theme when Wei Jian and I sit down to discuss what should we lay down, the topic of this conference. The shrinking population and disproportionately aged population, how to deal with. So if we look at the macro view of public health issue, you know, after the 2008 financial crisis, the Taiwan economy has been marginalized by China because of the growing of Chinese economy. So we are very sitting in a big neighbors, and we have to compete everything with them financially, economically. And this is, we never thought about because we are 4 tigers in Asia. So we are, you know, everything we are leading now. It's, we have to readjust. And US used to be the only role models we have to follow. Now we have a big countries neighbor to us. So how should we balance all these economic or social developments? And there are always a potential military conflicts between Taiwan and China. And that will involve Taiwan, China, Japan, and US, you know, our big neighbors. So this, as I mentioned, wars is a big threat of public health. So we have to think of keep this. So peace in this area is very important. If we don't have peace, all of a sudden, all these, you know, we saw that World War II happening, and we know we don't want to repeat it. So peace is, and the role of democracy and equity in public health become more and more important. You know, when KP was said that he has to convince some key person in our government, and they made a decision, and very wise decisions, and everything can be implemented through, from national policy to educational systems. Right now, we have to work through the democratic process. A lot of, you know, persuasions, discussion, dealings, you know, all this, we haven't encountered before. So in our health policy and management, we have to start teaching students how to lobby, how to do social marketing, all these kind of things. That's the role of the democracy. But good thing is equity. We have to, look at all these genders, age, and demographic and the population equity problem, and geologically. And we have to, recently I have been promoted a lot. There's a big divide in terms of air quality in Taiwan, north and south. And southern part of Taiwanese are suffering, twice PM2.5 concentration daily. So it's environmental injustice and also health inequity. So all this is important for us to look at. So we need how to solve it. We need global partnership in more. In the past, NTU College of Public Health has set up programs in Malawi and Tomé. We kept sending students there, and we have trained many PhD from Mongolia, and they are now keeping the leading roles there. And we have some contacts with Malaysia, Thailand, and we do have a strong correlation with Japan, from Kyoto University, Tokyo University. So I think we have to work together. And not to mention, we have so many faculty, they are trained in the US, so we have all these connections. And I think this is a public-private partnership, locally, regionally, and internationally, that we have to work together to face the challenge of global public health in the 21st century. This is my introduction. Thank you.
So to express appreciation, we would like to invite Dr. Conrad Chen from the KP Chen family, also a board member of the foundation, to present the gift to thank Professor Chen for the speech. And this is a gift with the symbol of prosperity. Thank you. Thank you. So now I'll hand the session again back to the moderator, Professor Wu.
Okay, it's time for discussion. So let's welcome our speakers and our guests to come to the stage again. Actually, I prefer standing here. So it's time to test our dean's memory again. But we'll have time open for discussion for questions from the audience. So maybe our guest can give some questions or comments to Professor Zhang's speech.
Well, I thank you for that wonderful way that you summarized the demographic transition, but also brought us forward to possible solutions and a way to go forward for public health equity. I was particularly struck by your last points around public-private partnership. I really think that this is an essential way for going forward, that the problems we face in public health and global health require all hands on deck. And so I'd be very interested in learning more about your thoughts about how do we fully realize this concept of public-private partnership on behalf of public health and global health. And a major theme for me for this conference today is the value of a public health education. And I would love to learn more about and discuss, if we have the time, the concept of bringing more undergraduates into the public health movement early in their educational career. These are the two things I'm most intrigued about by your talk. Thank you.
You're testing his memory, right?
Yeah.
I thought that from this morning's video, as well as from your presentation, the challenges ahead will require a new breed of public health practitioners. Public health practitioners that are able to integrate across different disciplines. So it's not just being multidisciplinary, but individual public health practitioners that actually can integrate several different disciplines, and public health practitioners that can also implement, not just like we academics, but people who are out there actually implementing. So I'll be very interested in, especially in the undergraduate program that you have, how are we going to train a new generation of public health practitioners who are able to both integrate as well as implement?
I respect your positive attitude toward public education, particularly undergraduate. Only 150 years ago, Japan opened the country threatened by US Admiral Perry to open our country. And then at that time, Japan was a developing country, and infantile mortality was really high. But it's known that even before Japan made a substantial economic growth, infantile mortality dropped really quickly after we opened the country. And there's no clear answer why it happened, but one, I think, a researcher hypothesized that it might be related to good public health education for women, even in elementary school. But I don't know. So what is Taiwan's policy toward public health education in elementary or junior high school age?
So, Doctor, may I continue? Thank you very much. You have a great talk. And since so it's very impressive that the NTU College of Public Health now accredited by the CPH, and also this morning I am very delighted to learn about the achievement done by the Professor Gunpei Chen. So he took a really great leadership in the public health in Taiwan. So I'm most interested in learning how to develop the public health leadership among the students. Leadership in the public health. I think that leadership is a part of one of the generic competencies for the public health, like the communication and the diversities and also the public health biology. But I'm most interested in how to develop the leadership, sense of leadership among our students, since this society is quickly changing, and we need to tackle with the many different problems from time to time. So people need to have their own leadership inside to tackle with these social problems. So if I understand correctly, the leadership is a capacity to have their own view and also they make their view in the real. So that also the leadership wouldn't be done by the leaders like the Gunpei Chen, but also the leadership can be achieved by the younger generation, younger students. So I really would like to know how you educate the leadership in your College of Public Health, INTU?
Okay, I'll go from Michelle's, and we're still learning public-private partnership. As I told you, we are a young democracy. So it's not easy to readjust our relations with governments. We used to work very closely. Now, to some point, you have to be critical. And that's sour your relationship. But if you are evidence-based findings, you have to give them this kind of advice where you offend them. And there's not only one party, there are several parties. How our measures can convey through all the parties and not become partisans is very difficult. For private, it's much easier for public health to work with NGOs. They're kind of non-government organizations, like we have Jiangdong Foundation working on anti-tobacco smoking. And so we, right away, you say, oh, we can work together. But how can you work with industries and business? That's very new to us. There's some kind of conflict interest, and how should we reveal that? But if there's no business solution, sometimes cannot be good solutions. So it's really not easy. So that's, we never thought of it before. And so we, as leadership in our deans and directors, we start discussing this. We have to come to some guidelines and norms for our faculty to do. And the majority of our faculty now actually either fund some NGOs for workers' rights, workers' health, or work closely with environmental groups or disadvantaged groups to do. But I don't think it's enough because the society has all players. We have to do that. So I don't have answers, but it's very challenging, And in terms of how to attract young people to get into the public health, that's, I have the kids, up to a certain age, I don't know them, right? Because they spend more times in the net. So it's a virtual world they're working. So we have to change some kind of message. We have to go through, that it goes through in the virtual world, every 24 hours. I think they spend more time with their mobile phone and computers than their parents or their colleagues. So we have to take this route as our communication. Yeah. But in the meantime, in terms of leadership of this, we are trying to do this community-based teaching. I think we have to go back to the roots of public health. It's communities. So when we were in Boston, Harvard School of Public Health was always criticized by 10 hours back beyond the Huntington Avenue. But if you go back to Boston, it has been changing a lot. So how to work closely with your communities. And we have disadvantaged communities like 50 meters walking from here. So we now have so-called university social responsibility programs. We work with social science together to look at this, and they, during this urban development, they have to move back. So we want to, in the coming years, we want to work on this. We had all these districts in Taipei, and they call Wanhua. Then we will go there to do our USR there with our social science and engineering together. So I think if we make project meaningful and young generation only work on meaningful things, so make them excited and they will get interested in this public health, I think. So it seems to me it's not enough to get data, write a paper, and publish it. So as Michelle said, we have to carry more into the practice. That is the kind of things. And in terms, so leadership is really very difficult to teach. I think can learn from from the work. Yeah, so provide them more opportunities. So I think as global health issues become global, we have to provide global arena for them to do. So we will take students to Africa, to Mongolia, to these kind of places. And in the coming years, we will establish more sites in South Asian countries that we will let them know. You know, one story is there's a graduate from the Department of Economics. This young man saw this earthquake on Nepal. So after the earthquake, and they saw they can help them. So they, through the internet, found a calling from remote mountain. It's a social network. So 200 NTU students joined, and 150 plus joined from outside NTU. So they formed a group to go to Nepal to help. So after the earthquake, then, you know, a lot of people went there to help. Then later on, a lot of them left. On their way to retreat from that area, they saw a lot of kids playing on the street. And they find out they have nowhere to get education. So these young people came back to Taiwan and formed a group to continue support education for Nepalese children. Then our professors in Department of Economics, you know, kind of working together with the students. So students late, and they went there to do some kind of quasi random trial. Because some family got the scholarship from Taiwan, donate to help them have the education, and some did not get because we cannot provide all of them. And so they will track them, the performance. And they are coming to discuss with us in terms of TV controls in that area. So I think that's, if you provide young people opportunity, what I'm saying is sometimes leadership is theirs, and we have to follow them. That's the best. So I think as Dean, I want to create a more and more platform for them, locally, regionally. So I hope we can work with, you know, university in the world doing that. In terms of health education, we have formal health education from primary school. We have a book. Yeah, everybody has to, it's a compulsory. Yes.
What's the name of the subject?
Health education, just education. Yes. So it's going on, but we are under this kind of curriculum reform. I think it's not only health education only, it includes other things. So we are very spacious on this health literature because from very young, we educate vaccination is good for you and washing is good, you know. So this kind of thing is very special. And up to junior high school, first year junior high school, we still have this. So the birth control, that we grew up. But under this new society, we have different views and values of health and gender, and this. So now it's become a very debated topic, how to teach. You know, we used to say there's two genders, there's so many genders, how to teach it. So that's the kind of thing. And my brother's Geishan. I forgot your questions. I really.
Practitioners.
The public health challenges or the new public health practitioners of the future will need to be able to integrate.
Integration,
be able to
yes.
implement. So especially in undergraduate education, how do you train them to integrate and implement?
Yeah, so, you know, the core competence of public health has stressed a lot on the ability to integrate, you know, knowledge, skills, you know, social resource together to make things happen. So I think public health, I agree with Michelle this morning that we have to go beyond public health. We have to work with, you know, business school, government, law schools, So one thing is we have to encourage our undergraduate students to have double majors. They can learn another expertise. And we are trying to open up for other specialty to major public health. So we have about 40 to 50 undergraduate slots every year, but probably we will have another 100 from engineering, from life science, humanity, to come to majors. I think this is the way, and always we stress study based on project, and project has to have different background to work together, and or across countries. And I have a course with Korea and Japan, and a course with Japan and US. So we team up them to work project together. So this kind of training is good for them to have the ability of integrations. And yeah, believe it or not, they are much better than us. They are so swift in doing things together. So they can produce 3 minutes videos, when they are away from, and they integrate together to do health promotion. So I think this is the way we have to, and again, provide opportunity and arenas for young and set a stage for us to retreat as early as possible. Okay.
Very nice. So our dean demonstrated that he has very good memory. Now let's have time for questions from the audience. It's possible we can turn on the light. Yeah, you can ask questions not just for Dean Zhang, but also any of our guests. Please state your name and affiliations before the question.
I'm very honored to be able to offer a chance to ask the first question. I'm a Harvard graduate, and that's a privilege. I appreciate all this beautiful talk, particularly Williams and Fisher but I do have another question of bigger scales. Look at the 100 years ago, 1920s, in Asia, and 100 years, after that we have two wars in the early 19th, 20th centuries. And now, 75 years, we were very lucky with our civil war. But it was a very serious competition in terms of productivity, economies, and land territory, and how public health people can serve the continent. I'm talking about Asia in a better way. They are serving a lot of challenges, air pollution, demographic, but what do, thank you. Well, it's even far-reaching, yeah. So what do the public health professions, there was a lot of students, they're going to lead this area another 50 years, which after we already out of the field, they are still ongoing. What would be the perspective for our public health in the coming 50 years? And what might be changing? And what should they be prepared? May I ask such a humble question to you? Thank you so much.
Well, that's a very important question. And I think it's something we struggle with as public health educators in being sure that we're preparing the next generation to tackle the next big set of problems. The one thing I know for sure is that we really do have to work towards preparing individuals who will embrace a career of lifelong learning, that the problems we know from the last century become even more complex. And they become more complex because we're all in this together. If you have an outbreak in one place, it is an outbreak that affects all of us. So we have to think globally. We are no longer just thinking about the local community. We have to think about local community, we have to think about national, and we have to think about regional and global. And I think there's integration that happens across multiple levels. Integration that happens at the different sites of where action in public health begins, but also globally. So what that means for me, I think, is that we have to support the next generation to be multilingual and multicultural in ways that transcend just acquiring another language. They must be able to work across disciplines, must be able to do that team science, and they have to have resources to make this work real and relevant. So when I think about what the next generation should look like, they should be individuals coming to public health with training from all of the basic core disciplines. They should be able to work with business, they should be able to work with NGOs, they should be able to work with governments in ways that we were not always formally trained. But now we recognize that that must be part of the training that we provide the next generation. We have to be smarter. It's not, as the dean said, not about doing more, but being smarter and doing better.
Is there any other feedback from the panelists?
I don't know. 50 years is beyond my imagination, and I will be dead.
Don't be too sure.
But I'm really interested in to see progression of digital health and empowered consumers, including patients and community residents and all people. Instead of our researchers and policymakers taking initiative, I hope in 50 years, those consumers take real initiative. I see some trends in healthcare already. In the United States, I'm really amazed to see the big community, so-called patient-powered registry, and I see a lot of future in that. Also, I'm so amazed that high school girls, boys in Japan are so dependent on Twitters, you know. Facebook is old man's hobby. Twitter's community is a high school boys and girls community. And it really changing the culture. And what is that? Is that a rich resource for social connectedness, information sharing? I don't know. I'll be really interested in seeing the future. Sorry, my answer is not satisfactory.
Let me just expand on that as well. I think one major shift in public health that needs to take place is we tend to say that public health is a population science. And we tend to think that public health is only a population science. I think we need to go beyond that and say that it's not just a population science. We need to try and personalize prevention. That it's not just personalized medicine for the patients, but for normal, healthy individuals, how do we go about personalizing prevention? That the future in public health is no longer just I reach out to the masses, but I reach out to individuals among the masses.
So thank you very much. I think that's a very good question. And let me stick to my interest in the leadership in the public health. And I think I would recommend the younger generation to have their wider own view on the public health program, and also think about the innovative way to solve these problems by their own. So probably what you learned from your professor in the School of Public Health cannot be useful in tackling with the new things. So if you have the kind of sense of leadership through the public health education, so you could be more effectively working on the new emerging problems. So that's
Okay. Yes.
My name is Chen King from College of Public Health, NTU here. I would like to, I remember I went to Thailand, Bangkok, and saw the Mahidol University. What they did several years ago is they pick up a certain community, and they have a doctor student, a master student to guide undergraduate public health student to pick up, to work with the community. And first is to find out the problem together with the community resident, and then find out the solution. So it's like maybe 1 to 2 years project. It's a practical project. But I find out the NTU actually in earlier years, I think around the 1950s to 60s, also work very closely with the community. And, but right now, I think younger professors have more pressure for promotion about the papers, you know. So we work on more about papers, but we are away from the true problems, true real problems. So whenever you mention about the leadership, I think the best leadership is to work through the experience. And I had experience in working on the editor-in-chief when I was studying in the United States during the diplomatic broken down between Taiwan and the USA. So I find out that's very valuable experience, because leadership, you cannot go to 10 different classes, but you don't know how to deal with difficult people. You have to learn how to work with difficult people and also reach the common goal. So regarding to the question about the integration and the leadership, and I think we have to think about some kind of educational approach, which is not just a class curriculum at all, but more practical experience to let the student to find out the problem. Ding, Chen, and I went to the NTU University on November 15, and I was very amazed that a Nepal student, I think he should learn, and we just went to talk with him so he can work with public health people. So public health people need to find their collaborator even when they are very young. So I think we should create this kind, not everybody, but some students who have this kind of, how you call the broader concern, and also to have a higher social consciousness. That's what we can do. I remember Harvard University, the medical school program, you have pick up a specific student to give them more depth training about microbiology, immunology, all those basic science. You pick up some student that they already have this kind of intention, then you give them, but not a required course. Required course will be a disaster, because then all the students, they are not happy there. So you pick up what they like to do, and then we give them the opportunity. That's what I was trying to say.
Okay, thanks, Professor King, sharing her experience on this topic. Yes.
Right, thank you very much. Wang Yunlao from Malaysia, and I'm also a visiting professor at Taipei Medical University, Taipei East West West. Thank you very much for the excellent talk that you have given, and also all the various discussions. Direct to the point is the issue of the core competencies in public health, and one of which is the cultural sensitivity. And I didn't hear that, you know, in your presentation. Probably it's because being Taiwan is of one race, and being Japanese in Japan is of one race. So I'm just wondering, you know, whether any one of you can enlighten us as to inculcate, you know, the whole value of cultural sensitivity among our public health students. Thank you.
Well, I will just say that it has to be in public health a core competency that we work across diverse populations. And I mean diversity in the broadest sense of the word. Social class, of course, race and ethnicity, but gender identity, and disability status and others. So I think it's fundamental, even in places like Japan and Taiwan that diversity and cultural competence be a very core and very highly valued part of the curriculum. You know, I wanted to get back to the point about the balance between academic public health and practice public health. This is a very important tension that's existed with our discipline for a long time. In June in Seattle, I was asked to give a keynote at the 50th anniversary of the Society for Epidemiology Research, SER. SER, this society was founded by Brian McMahon, Abraham Lilienfeld, and Milton Terrace. 25 years before, when they were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the society, Milton, Brian, and Abraham lamented that public health, as it started as a social movement, had become more and more of an academic discipline and moved away from practice. And that the pressures of the emerging public health faculty to publish or perish really changed the way we embraced our fellow non-academic public health people who were practicing. This is a painful truth about how our discipline unfolded, but it doesn't mean that we have to carry on this way for the next 50 years. As dean of the famous Harvard Chan School of Public Health, I will tell you that one of my hopes for leaving a legacy behind would be to embody what KP Chen has embodied as someone who values both the research and education of public health, but also the practice of public health. This is a false dichotomy if we believe they have to be separate and different. We can and we should embody and embrace in our school those faculty members who are deeply ingrained and devoted to the translation and implementation and practice of public health, as well as we embrace those who are the methodologists and the discovery scientists. That's why public health is so powerful of a vision for the globe. And so I hope that together we can bring back the public health that marries and holds sacred both the discovery side as well as the practice side. So your point's very well taken, and I thank you for that statement.
I want to respond to the ethnics or cultures. You know, that's quite important in Asia. You know, as you mentioned, Taiwan and Japan are kind of monoethnics, but we still have over 15 tribes in Taiwan, Aboriginal, we call that's very different ethnicities. So in our college time, we always had some missions to the mountainside. So I personally experienced quite a couple of years interacting with Aboriginals and many Aboriginal friends. This is very worthwhile for me. And in the past few years, I have receiving interns from Malaysia. You know, I was the first one to try to draw the Hadafu guide in Taipei. So, you know, all this, we think we have to change. And if now you are going to the rural sides of Taiwan, and some places, 1 out of 4 couples as brides from South Asian countries. So we are actually seeing some migrations through marriage, through working in Taiwan. But our society has not, you know, open enough, try to has a systemic way of education or everything. So this is what our public health will do for the future. So we have some colleagues working on these migrant workers. Migration and health is important issues. And it's worrying me because you look at this, even in Europe, right? You saw that the rise of the alternative for Deutsch party in Germany, and they are receiving millions migrations escaping from wars. then still the society after the World War II has the response is unbelievable. And look at this Myanmar's, Rohingyas. That's, we have to start learning in our region. I think Malaysia and Singapore are right in the middle of these mixtures. So that's, I think, we have to have a global partnership for us to learn in advance, because under the change, the global change, there will be in the futures, the weathers, migrations, the war migration around our regions. We have to have this cultural sensitivity and social capability to deal with. So this will be top on our agenda. We'll pick up very many countries that we can work with, because we are assuming in the futures there will be migrations from these countries. So this my response, but we are still in the very beginning of learning.
Okay, maybe we can take one last question from the audience. Oh, okay, sorry.
May I respond to these two questions? The leadership and the cultural sensitivities are very important general competencies for public health professionals. And what I learned from this session is probably connecting the student with community is very key to train student in terms of these general competencies. For instance, I brought one of my students to the very small village close to the nuclear plant, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, which had an accident, and this student really met with the community leaders and also municipal officers to learn about what kind of leadership should be needed in that village. And also even that's within one country, Japan, but the village has a different culture. So they need to consider the local culture to implement the public health. So I think these program could be very useful. So thank you very much.
One last question, yes.
Hello, I'm Eric Chen from Kaohsiung Medical University, and I wanted to follow up on the comment regarding cultural sensitivity, and that basically the thought that I had was there's a hardwired human instinct of us versus them mentality. Therefore, there is it seems inevitable that we will pick out differences in terms of having biases or unconscious biases. And I was wondering, is there any area of public health where we're looking into sort of behavior psychology or behavior economics in terms of how can we use human psychology to mitigate or lessen this kind of maybe unconscious bias or the human tendency towards highlighting these differences. I know that from a ideal perspective, we want to be embracing, but maybe there is a fundamental human need to separate and divide, saying that there's us versus them mentality.
So let me try, because the dean said that I should try.
Yes, Chen.
This is not my area of scholarship, so I'm going to respond just as a citizen of the world. And I will say there is this, we do seem to be hardwired to do an us versus them kind of thing. And in my 25 years in public health, I'll tell you the one thing that I've had a great deal of joy in doing, and that is in training young people. I've had a training grant that's funded by the US government for 25 years. And the training grant was built on the premise that we have in the United States a very huge health disparity that exists and is globally, everyone knows about this. But 25 years ago, the federal government decided that it was important to start to train leaders from underrepresented minority populations in the US to begin to take responsibility and leadership roles in their communities to address public health problems. And the training program was meant to take these kids who were underrepresented, minority kids from poor schools, some of them never even had a passport, and to allow for global, immersive training in public health centers around the world. I was a first-year assistant professor at the University of Washington when I saw this request for application. And I thought, I've got to do this. I've got to find a way to win this grant and take kids from poor communities across the US, underrepresented minorities, Asian Americans, at the time Southeast Asian, Pacific Islanders, African Americans, Hispanics, and give them an opportunity to go into laboratories, public health schools around the world and have an experience. And I would take a student, let's say from the Philippines, and send them to train in Ethiopia. And I would take the student from Ethiopia and send them to train at Chulalongkorn in Bangkok. And I just sat back and watched these kids realize we're all so alike in so many ways. The problems that we have in public health, at community health levels, the erosion of poverty on the psyche of populations across the life course. And I think in designing and sustaining for 25 years a training program that takes students out of the communities that they know and put them in what they expect to be foreign communities. And then they find that the language of public health is universal, that inequity is inequity, and it impacts populations across the life course, and that the solutions are brought about by working with communities, for me has been one of the most rewarding things in life. And I've trained in this program over 180 students. And I will tell you that they now recognize that we're more similar than we are different. And it brings me a lot of joy.
Great. Great. I do like to follow because this is the way to become the dean, right? That's, when you are an assistant professor, don't think about which project can produce the best papers. Think about what's the best for the people. I think that's very, very good.
Yeah, thank you. In School of Public Health, we teach students to have healthy behaviors. So we need to have the lunch at the right time. Let's thank our speaker and the guests again.